My husband couldn't have children for 3 years. So when his pregnant girlfriend showed up in my house and my own family told me I was overreacting, I almost believed them until I realized they weren't protecting him. They were protecting the money tied to my house. And the papers they pushed me to sign were already set to transfer everything. But what they didn't know was I had already started building my revenge with proof. And by the time federal investigators got involved and traced the financial trail back to them, everything changed. I still remember the exact moment, 6:42 a.m., when the knock came and the door opened. And just weeks later, the same people who called me crazy were standing in court, facing charges that would follow them for years. This is Alara, and this is how I turned their plan into my revenge and took everything back without signing a single line. Chapter 1. The Room That Wasn't Theirs. I pulled into my driveway and saw two strangers carrying a crib into my house. I sat there for a second with the engine still running, like maybe if I didn't move, the scene would correct itself. Wrong house, wrong street, something simple like that. But the cracked edge of the front step was still there. The porch light I never fixed was still flickering. The maple tree that dumped leaves all over my yard every fall was still mine. So were the men walking through my front door without knocking. I killed the engine and stepped out, keys tight in my hand. Neither of them looked at me. One adjusted his grip on the long white box and pushed the door open with his shoulder like he had done it before, like he belonged there. That was the first thing that felt wrong. The second was how quickly I realized this wasn't random. This house wasn't luck. It wasn't inherited. I bought it in 2018 after years of saving and overtime and saying no to everything that wasn't necessary. $52,000 down. 20 of that came from my sister, Leela, who handed it to me like it was nothing and told me she wanted me to have something permanent, something no one could take. There was only one name on that deed, mine. I walked up the steps and pushed the door open. The smell hit me first. Fresh paint, too clean, too sharp, cutting through everything that used to feel like home. The living room looked off. Furniture shoved out of place, a lamp leaning, boxes stacked against the wall like someone had started changing things and didn't care enough to finish neatly. I didn't stop there. I was already looking at the hallway. A sheet of plastic hung across it, taped at the top, shifting slightly with the movement behind it. I could hear a drill, low voices, the sound of wood being handled, tightened, adjusted. My chest tightened with it. That hallway led to one room I never touched. I walked forward and pulled the plastic down. The room on the other side made something in me go still. The walls were painted blue, not the warm neutral Leela chose when we first moved in. The bed was gone, the dresser was gone, the shelf where she kept her notebooks and old paperbacks was gone. In the middle of the room, a crib sat half assembled. A box of baby clothes was open on the floor, tags still attached. The closet stood open, empty. They didn't pack her things, they removed her. This was her room, the one place in the house I left untouched after she died, the one space that still felt like she might walk back in and pick up where she left off. Now it looked like she had never been there. I didn't react right away. I just stood there, taking it in, like my brain needed a second to catch up with what my eyes were seeing. Footsteps behind me. Marcus. He had a screwdriver in his hand and saw me like I had just come home a little early. "Oh, you're back." I turned to him. "What are you doing?" He glanced at the crib, then back at me, like the answer should have been obvious. "Getting it ready." Ready for what? There was a pause, small, just enough to notice. "For the baby." The word landed flat. I looked at him. What baby? That was when she stepped forward. Tessa. She moved slowly, one hand resting on her stomach, calm in a way that didn't feel natural, like she had decided ahead of time how this was going to look, how she was going to sound. I wanted to tell you in a better way. Better. Marcus rubbed the back of his neck. She's pregnant. Everything got quiet. Not loud, not chaotic, just quiet in a way that sharpened everything instead of blurring it. Because one memory pushed everything else out. June 2021. A clinic that smelled like disinfectant and stale coffee. Marcus sitting beside me, joking too much because he was nervous. 40 minutes later, he walked out slower, a little uncomfortable but relieved. I drove him home, picked up his prescription, listened to him explain how it was a one-time decision that fixed a permanent problem. A week later, he showed me the report. 0 motility. I didn't understand it at first. He had to explain. 0 meant 0. No chance. I looked at him now, standing in what used to be my sister's room. I asked him, "Did you tell her?" "Tell her what?" I held his eyes. About the procedure. There it was, that quick shift, that flicker he couldn't quite hide. I took care of that. I had it reversed. No. The words settled in my head before I even thought about it. No, you didn't. Reversals don't just happen quietly. There are records, appointments, time off work, follow-ups, bills. None of that existed, and I would know. Tessa stepped a little closer, her voice softer. This doesn't have to turn into something ugly. We're trying to do the right thing. I looked around the room again. The paint, the crib, the empty space where my sister used to be. I asked, "Did anyone ask me?" Marcus exhaled, already irritated. "We live here together, Alara." "No, you live here with me." That shifted something. I saw it in his face. He straightened. "Why are you making this about ownership?" Because it was. Because everything in this room said they had already made a decision about my house without me. I took a few steps in. "Where are her things?" "They're safe," he said quickly. "That's not an answer." Tessa spoke again, steady, controlled. "This baby changes things, for all of us, even legally." Legally? I looked at her, then back at him. "Say it again." "What?" "The reversal. I told you, I had it done." 0 meant 0. There was no version of reality that made sense, and that was when it clicked. I didn't react because I was confused. I didn't react because I was starting to understand. I took one last look around the room. This wasn't random. This had Douglas all over it. The way things were moved without asking, the way Marcus stood there, half defensive, half unsure, the way Tessa spoke like this was already settled. This was a plan. I turned and walked out. "Where are you going?" Marcus called. I stopped at the hallway and rested my hand against the wall for a second. "I'm thinking," I said. I pulled the plastic sheet back into place, sealing the room off again. Then I stood there, listening to the house settle. If he couldn't have children, then whose baby was it? Chapter 2. You're overreacting. I did not confront them that night. I walked past that room like it was someone else's mistake and not mine to fix yet. The plastic sheet brushed my shoulder as I passed, and for a second I almost pulled it down again just to make sure it was still real. I didn't. I kept moving, grabbed my keys, and left the house before I said something I could not take back. The road was empty. I drove with both hands tight on the wheel, eyes forward, trying to keep my thoughts from spinning too far ahead of me. Shock has a way of making everything feel distant, like you are watching your own life from the outside. I needed distance. I needed something solid. By the time I came back, the house was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that means decisions have already been made without you. I did not go near the hallway again. I went straight to bed, lay there staring at the ceiling, replaying every detail. The crib, the paint, Tessa's hand on her stomach, Marcus acting like this was normal, and that one word, 0. I slept maybe 3 hours, if that. The next morning, I got dressed and went to work. Keystone Title Group had rules. Facts mattered. Paper trails mattered. If something did not line up, you did not move forward until it did. That was the job. That was the standard. I sat down, logged in, and pulled up Marcus Hale. The file opens clean. Procedure, June 2021. Follow-up, August 2021. 0 motility. I stared at the screen longer than I should have, like the system might correct itself if I waited. It didn't. Nina Patel leaned back in her chair and looked at me. "You look like you got hit by a truck." "Feels about right," I said. "Home stuff?" I nodded once. "Just checking something." She watched me for a second. "You want me to help you dig? I'm free after 10. "I've got it," I said. "I just need to see it for myself." She didn't push. She just gave a small nod and turned back to her screen. I pulled insurance records next. Same dates, same procedure, no claims that suggested a reversal, no follow-up surgeries, no gaps where something like that could have been hidden. Clean. Too clean. I leaned back, exhaled slowly, then leaned forward again. I checked again. Different system, same answer. 0. Around noon, I stood in the break room with a cup of coffee I was not going to drink. My phone sat on the counter in front of me. I picked it up, unlocked it, opened Marcus's contact, then just stared at his name. Proof. The word sat in my head like it was already sent. I locked the phone instead. Not yet. I needed him to say it out loud again. When I got home that evening, his father was already there. Douglas Hale sat in my chair like it had always belonged to him. One leg crossed, hands relaxed, posture easy, like he had settled into something permanent. He looked up when I walked in. "There you are." I closed the door slowly. "You letting yourself in now?" "I go where my family needs me," he said. Family. I set my bag down on the table. "Where's Marcus?" "Upstairs. We've been talking." Of course they had. Marcus came down a moment later. He stopped halfway when he saw me, like he was trying to read the room before stepping into it. "Hey," he said. "Hey." That was it. No apology, no explanation. Tessa stood in the kitchen, one hand resting on her stomach again. She did it every time, like it was part of a script she had already memorized. Tessa said, "We were just discussing what comes next. We need to be practical about this." Practical. I looked at her, then at Marcus. "Tell me what you told her." Marcus shifted his weight. "I told her what she needed to know." "That's not what I asked." Douglas leaned forward slightly. "Let's keep this calm," he said. "There's no reason to turn this into something emotional." I ignored him. "Did you tell her about the procedure?" I said. Marcus ran a hand over his face. "I handled that." "How?" "I had it reversed." The word landed flat. I felt something in me settle instead of react. "Where?" I said. He hesitated. "At a clinic." "Which one?" "It doesn't matter." "It matters if you want me to believe you." Silence. Tessa stepped in, her voice softer, controlled. "I don't think this is fair. You're acting like this isn't real." "I'm acting like I need proof," I said. Douglas stood slowly. "She's still grieving. This is how it shows up. Confusion, control issues." There it was. He said it like he had been waiting for the moment, like I was a problem to be explained, not a person to be answered. I looked at Marcus. "You're going to let him do that?" Marcus did not answer. That was the answer. Something sharp moved through my chest, but it didn't break me. It clarified things. "This is my house," I said quietly, "not something you get to rearrange when I'm not looking." No one spoke. I looked at Tessa. "You don't get to move into a life that isn't yours and call it practical." Her expression tightened, just for a second. Marcus stepped forward. "Why are you making this harder than it needs to be? We can figure it out if you just stop fighting it." Fighting it. Like I was the obstacle. Like the truth was optional. I picked up my keys. "Do you have paperwork?" "For what?" "For the reversal." He hesitated again. "No," he said. That was enough. I nodded once. "Then we're done talking." I walked out before anyone could try to soften it. The air outside felt colder than it should have been. I got in my car, closed the door, and sat there for a second, hands resting on the wheel. Then picked up my phone and called Colin Reeves. He answered quickly. "Hey, what's going on?" "I need you to check something," I said. "Tell me." "Medical records, timeline, any indication of a reversal procedure after mid-2021. He was quiet for a moment. "That specific?" "Yes." "All right, send me what you've got. I'll see what I can pull." "I will." I hung up and leaned back. For a second, just long enough to feel it, doubt slipped in. What if I missed something? What if there was a version of this where I was wrong? I stared straight ahead. No, the numbers were clean, the records were clean, and the truth usually is, which meant one of them was lying, and I was going to find out which. Chapter 3. Paper Doesn't Lie. I stopped trying to convince myself there was a simple explanation. By morning, I only cared about what I could prove. I got to the office before anyone else, sat down, and let the silence settle around me. It helped me think. No voices, no opinions, no one trying to soften what didn't make sense. Just facts. My phone rang before I even logged in. Colin. I picked up right away. "Tell me," I said. "I ran everything I could access," he said. "Insurance, private clinics, out-of-network billing. There is no record of a reversal." I leaned back in my chair, eyes fixed on the ceiling. "None at all?" I said. "None," he said. "With that timeline, conception isn't just unlikely, it cannot happen." I let that sit for a second. Not unlikely, impossible. "Keep going," I said. "Anything tied to Douglas Hale, property, financial pressure, anything that looks planned." There was a pause. "You think this is bigger than it looks," he said. "I know it is." "All right," he said. "Give me a few hours." I ended the call and finally opened my system. My house file came up immediately. Purchase year 2018, price $268,000, down payment $52,000. I remembered exactly how I got there. Every extra shift. Every weekend I said no to something easier. And Lila, $20,000 from her. She never made it a big deal, just transferred the money and told me I deserved something that was mine. I swallowed and scrolled down. Ownership. Single name. Mine. Paper doesn't forget. It doesn't care who moved in later or who started acting like they belonged. It records what actually happened. Nina walked in not long after and glanced at me. "You're here early again," she said. "Couldn't sleep." She set her bag down and looked at my screen. "You're checking your own property?" "I need to understand something," I said. She pulled her chair closer. "You ever seen someone try to push ownership without telling the actual owner?" I asked. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she opened a file and turned her screen toward me. "Look at this," she said. I leaned in. Multiple documents, small changes over time, nothing that looked aggressive on its own. But together, she said, tapping the page, it creates pressure. Late fees, deadlines, confusion. People panic, they sign something just to make it stop. I nodded slowly. "And the person pushing it," I said, "already knows how it ends." She gave me a look. Exactly. I sat back, feeling something settle into place. This was not random. This was not emotional. This was structured. They're not building a family, they're building a transfer. Nina didn't ask who I meant. She just said, "Then don't let them rush you." I won't. By the time I left work, I knew what I was looking for. I got home earlier than usual. The house was quiet, no voices, no movement. I stood in the entry for a second, listening. Upstairs, water running. Good. I moved through the house carefully, keeping everything as it was. No lights switched on, no doors left open. I didn't want anything to look disturbed. His office door was slightly open. I pushed it just enough to slip inside. The desk was too clean. Nothing personal, nothing out of place. That told me everything I needed to know. I went straight to the bottom drawer. Locked, of course. I crouched down, pulled the small toolkit from the cabinet behind the chair. He never noticed details, not unless they were obvious. It took less than a minute. The lock gave. Inside, everything was arranged neatly. Files stacked, envelopes aligned, one folder without a label. I pulled it out slowly. Quit claim deed. My name printed clearly, signature line empty, grantee, Douglas Hale. For a second, I just stared at it. This wasn't a conversation waiting to happen. This was already in motion. My chest tightened, but not from panic, from clarity. Lila trusted me with that money. She believed I would build something stable, something safe, and now someone else was trying to take it. I placed the document back exactly where I found it. My phone vibrated. Colin again. I stepped into the hallway before answering. "What else?" I said. "I found a notary appointment, scheduled next week. Douglas Hale is listed." I closed my eyes briefly. "They're moving fast," I said. "Faster than most people catch," he said. "Send me everything." "I will." I hung up and slipped the phone back into my pocket. Upstairs, the water shut off. I moved quickly, closing the drawer, locking it, returning the tool. Then I walked into the kitchen like I had just come home. Marcus came down a minute later, drying his hair with a towel. "You're early," he said. "Slow day." He nodded, watching me. "Did you think about what we talked about?" he asked. I did. "And?" "I think you're asking me to sign something you haven't shown me." His expression shifted just enough. "That's not what this is." "Then what is it?" He hesitated. Before he could answer, my phone buzzed again. An email. Homeowners Association, balance due, $3,842. Final warning, lien pending. I opened it fully. Account name, Douglas Hale. Of course. Late fees, pressure, deadlines. Create a problem, then offer the solution. I looked up at Marcus. "You ever check the HOA account?" I asked. He frowned. "No, my dad said he'd handle it." I'm sure he did. Marcus studied me now, trying to figure out what I knew. "What's going on?" he said. I held his gaze. "You tell me." "There's nothing to tell." I let that sit. Then I glanced toward the hallway, toward that room, the crib, the paint, the distraction. This was never about a baby. It was about ownership. I looked back at him. One question. "What?" "How much does she know?" He froze for half a second. Not long, but long enough. And that told me everything. Chapter 4. Dinner. I didn't say anything for 3 days. Not when Marcus tried to start small conversations in the kitchen. Not when Tessa moved around the house like she was settling into it. Not when Douglas stopped by like he had every right to be there. I let them get comfortable. Silence makes people careless. They start thinking the problem has passed, that whatever tension was there has settled on its own. It hadn't. On the 3rd day, I went home early and started cooking. Nothing complicated. Chicken, vegetables, something warm enough to keep everyone sitting a little longer than they planned. I set the table the way I always did, everything in place, everything familiar. Control, even if it was just the illusion of it. I texted each of them. Dinner tonight. No explanations. No one said no. Douglas showed up first. He always did. He walked in like the house already belonged to him, like he was checking on something he had invested in. "Smells good," he said. I nodded. "Sit down, it's almost ready." Marcus came in next, slower, watching me like he was trying to read what I hadn't said. Tessa followed him, hand on her stomach again, that same quiet gesture she kept repeating. My mother, Carol, arrived last. She stepped inside and paused for a second, her eyes moving across the room like she could feel something under the surface. "This feels serious," she said. "It's dinner," I said. We sat. For a few minutes, it played out like any other meal. Plates passed, small talk, the sound of forks against ceramic. Douglas took over the conversation quickly. "We should start thinking about the future," he said. "A child changes things. Structure matters." I let him talk. Marcus nodded along. Tessa added small comments, careful not to say too much. My mother stayed quiet, watching. I waited until everyone relaxed just enough. Then I stood up. "Before we talk about the future," I said, "we're going to talk about what's happening right now." The table went still. Douglas looked up at me, calm as ever. "If you have concerns," he said, "we can address them without turning this into something dramatic." I ignored that. Instead, I picked up the folder from the counter and placed it in the center of the table. "Let's start simple," I said. "Who decided to redo my sister's room?" No one answered. Marcus shifted in his chair. Tessa looked down. Douglas didn't move. "I asked a question," I said. "It made sense given the situation," Douglas said. "We were trying to prepare." "Prepare for what?" I said. "And why wasn't I part of that decision?" Silence again. I pulled the first document out and slid it toward him. "Second question," I said. "Who thought I would sign this?" My mother leaned forward, picking it up. "What is this?" she said. "Read it." Her eyes moved across the page, then stopped. "This transfers your house," she said, her voice tightening. "Yes," I said. "To him." I looked at Douglas. Marcus pushed his chair back suddenly. "You're twisting this," he said. "I'm not done," I said. He froze. I placed another set of papers on the table. June 2021. Procedure. Follow-up. 0. I looked straight at him. "You want to try that story again?" He didn't answer. Not this time. The silence was louder than anything he could have said. I turned to Tessa. "Your timeline doesn't match, but that's not the part I'm interested in." She looked at me, uncertain now. "I want to know how much you actually understand." Her hand tightened against her stomach. "I didn't know about any of this. I was told everything would be taken care of." "By who?" She hesitated, then looked at Douglas. That was enough. My mother set the paper down harder than she meant to. "You let this happen?" she said, looking at Marcus. "It's not like that." "Then explain it," she said. He couldn't, because there wasn't an explanation that didn't fall apart. Douglas stood, slower this time. "This is being handled poorly," he said. "We were trying to stabilize the situation by creating one," I said. I picked up my phone and set it on the table. Homeowners Association, outstanding balance, final notice, lien pending. My mother leaned closer. "It's in your name," I said, looking at Douglas, "not mine." Marcus looked between us, confused now. "Dad, what is she talking about?" Douglas didn't answer. He didn't have a clean version of this. I leaned forward slightly. "You built pressure," I said. "Fees, deadlines, problems I didn't know about." I tapped the deed. "And then you positioned yourself as the solution." No one spoke. Even Marcus had stopped trying. "I'm not signing anything," I said. Marcus stepped forward. "Elena, just slow down. We can fix this if you stop pushing." I looked at him. "You already picked a side." He didn't argue. That told me everything I needed from him. I picked up my phone again. "I've copied everything. Every document, every record, every timeline." Douglas's expression shifted, just enough to show it landed. "This doesn't have to go further," he said. "It already has." The room went quiet after that. No one reached for their plate. No one tried to soften it or direct it, because there was nothing left to hide behind. I stepped back from the table, letting the silence sit where it belonged. For the first time since this started, I wasn't reacting. I was in control, and I wasn't giving that up. Chapter 5. What they built collapsed. Everything unraveled faster than I expected, but not in the loud, dramatic way people imagined. It was quieter than that, like something old finally giving up after holding on too long. Douglas never came back. Not after that dinner, not after I laid everything out where no one could twist it or talk over it. He left like a man who knew the story was already written and he wasn't going to like the ending. 2 weeks later, I got the notice. A lien had been filed. Not on my house, on his. I stood in my kitchen when I read it, the same place he had once sat, acting like he owned the air in the room. For a second, I just stared at the numbers, the address, the name. Then I let out a breath I didn't realize I had been holding for months. It wasn't revenge, not the kind people talk about. It was gravity. Things fell where they were always going to fall. Marcus didn't handle it as well. He started missing shifts at the warehouse. First it was 1 day, then 2, then a whole week. I heard about it through Nina, whose cousin worked in payroll there. By the time they let him go, no one was surprised. I saw him once after that. Not planned. I was leaving the grocery store, keys in one hand, a bag of produce in the other, when I caught sight of him near the edge of the parking lot. He looked smaller somehow. Not physically, just less certain. He hesitated before walking over, like he wasn't sure he had the right to. "I've been trying to reach you," he said. I saw. I wanted to talk. I shifted the bag in my hand. "You're talking." He ran a hand through his hair, eyes darting like he was searching for the version of me that used to make this easy for him. "I can fix this. I messed up, I know that, but we can still—" "No," I said, not raising my voice, not rushing it, just clear. He blinked. "You didn't even let me finish." "I don't need to." There was a long pause, the kind that used to make me uncomfortable. It didn't anymore. "I had a plan," he said finally, softer now. "I thought if we could just get through this part—" "That was the problem," I cut in. "You had a plan that didn't include the truth." He looked down at the pavement. "I was trying to take care of things." "At my expense," I said. He didn't answer. I took a step back, putting just a little more space between us. "I gave you a chance, more than one. That was it. No yelling, no scene, just a line drawn where it should have been all along." I walked away before he could say anything else, and this time I didn't look back. Tessa didn't stay long after everything started falling apart. Without Douglas pushing, without Marcus pretending there was still a future to negotiate, she left. No announcement, no confrontation, just gone. And the baby? There was no baby. Just another lie that collapsed under its own weight once no one was left holding it up. My mother called a few days after the lien notice. I almost didn't answer, but I did. Her voice sounded different, not weaker, just stripped of whatever certainty she used to carry. "I was wrong," she said. No excuses, no long explanation, just that. I leaned against the counter, staring out the window at the yard Leela and I used to take care of together. "I know," I said. There was a pause. "I should have listened to you," she added. I didn't rush to fill the silence. "I'm not asking you to forget," she said. "I just needed you to hear me say it." I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. "I hear you," I said. That was all I could give her. For now, it was enough. After I hung up, I walked down the hallway and stopped outside Leela's room. For a long time, I hadn't gone in there unless I had to. It felt like stepping into something unfinished. But that day, I opened the door. I had repainted the walls a few days earlier. Not the old color. I couldn't bring myself to recreate what used to be there. This was something new, something that belonged to me now. The room was quiet, clean, untouched. I walked over to the window and ran my fingers along the sill where she used to leave little notes and scraps of paper. She helped me build this life, not just the house, Everything inside it, the routines, the small things that made it feel like something more than just walls and furniture. And when they tried to take it, they weren't just going after property, they were going after what we made. I turned and looked around the room one more time. I kept it, I said quietly, not sure if I was talking to her or to myself. Back in the living room, the deed sat on the table where I had left it. My name, just mine. No empty lines waiting for someone else to fill them in, no space for negotiation, no quiet assumptions about what I would eventually agree to. Paper remembers everything, every signature, every omission, every attempt to rewrite what was never theirs to begin with. And this time, so did I. I picked it up, folded it carefully, and placed it in the drawer. Not hidden, just safe. They thought they were taking my home. What they really did was show me exactly who didn't belong in it. And maybe that was the part I wouldn't have seen if everything had gone the way they planned. I stood there for a moment, letting the quiet settle in. It didn't feel empty anymore. It felt earned. If you were in my place, would you have stopped them the moment you knew, or would you have let them keep going just long enough to show you who they really were? If this story meant something to you, stay with me, share your thoughts below, and follow along for more stories that might feel a little closer to your own.